Hey everybody, welcome to day 85 of our 2020 Focus Bible reading, and we are on Matthew chapter 28. And this is what we read. So we come right off of the chapter that's one of the hardest chapters to read to this story right here. And as we read it, imagine you were hearing it for the first time. That's one of the hardest things that we have when it comes to the Gospels, especially some of the Christmas and Easter narratives. We've heard them so many times. We begin to fill in the blanks just listening to it. But imagine you were hearing this for the first time. You just heard the story of Jesus dying and being buried, and then his tomb being sealed. And this is what you read next. After the Sabbath at dawn, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble." So the soldiers took the money and did as they were instructed. And this story has been widely circulated among the Jews to this very day. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." And so we have this amazing report that Jesus gives to women to deliver. That to me is phenomenal. The only men on this scene were bribed not to talk about it, and they took the bribe. That's what we're told. But the women who were at the scene, they knew what happened. They saw what happened, and they were the first people on earth commissioned to share the story of Easter. Think about that. The very first people to see it and know it were these women who couldn't testify in a court of law, women who were not held very high standard, in very high esteem, and yet Jesus is like, these are the ones who are gonna. These are the ones who are gonna tell the story first, because they were actually the first to show up. Now, they didn't show up thinking that Jesus was going to be raised from the dead. They were going, and they were hoping to kind of get his body ready for burial. That's because the way that worked in the ancient world is they would treat the body in such a way that it would decay. It would decay quickly, and then they would take the bones and put them in an ossuary, a bone box about the size of a femur, the longest bone in the human body. They would put the bones in there, and that's what a person was buried in. And so they were going to go and make sure Jesus was prepared for that kind of process. And next thing you know, Jesus isn't there. And what I love about this passage is not just kind of the imagery of an angel, kind of rolling the stone away and then sitting on it. It's not like he's just sitting on it. And it was his very appearance that caused the guards to freak out and pass out. And I do notice that this is one time the angel shows up, and he does not tell the guys that see him first, "Don't be afraid." He was there to actually scare them. That actually worked. But to the women, he says, "Don't be afraid." To them, he's like, hey, do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen, just as he said. And here's the part that sticks out to me this time as I was reading it. Come and see the place where he lay. Come and see it. Come and see he's not here. It used to have the image of, the stone being rolled away so Jesus could get out of the tomb. No, no. At this point, Jesus, yes, he's physical, but there's something special about him. We're going to read in the other Gospels. He just kind of appears to them, and he's still physical in form, but his power is beyond kind of the regular mortal power that we see. He has the ability to just kind of come and go in ways that we do not. But the stone was rolled away so that we could look in, so that we could see. You can go to a lot of different places and see shrines that are devoted to dead saints, to religious leaders, and things like that. You go to the tomb of Jesus and there's nothing there. I've been there. I've seen it. There's nothing there, and that is an amazing thing. It is an amazing thing that that they rolled that stone away. The angels rolled that stone away just so that we could see that he isn't there. And he was indeed risen. And then the passage just goes on and talks about his interaction with his disciples. You'll very often hear critics of the Bible say, we're given just so many different stories about the resurrection of Jesus. How can they be true? Because they think these stories contradict each other. And they don't. What happens is when they're telling the story, they're telling it in a way where they're not necessarily giving all of the detail the same way. And so in one passage you'll read two angels. In another passage there are no angels. In this passage there's one angel. That doesn't mean there wasn't two. It just means there was one. The same thing goes with the women. How many were there? How many, one gospel says there were three. Another one says there were two. It's that type of thing. And it doesn't mean that there weren't three. It just means they named two of them, and it's stuff like that. The idea that Jesus, tells them to meet him in Galilee. Yes, that's ultimately where the story ends up. There was actually stuff that happened between him telling that to the women and him going to Galilee, but he, this gospel's just not trying to tell that part of the story, and there's a reason for that, and that's because as the gospel writers are writing, they are writing with an intention in mind. They are writing to get somewhere and to do something. So they're not all telling the same stories the same way. They're not structuring them the same way, and they're not reporting the same details. They are purporting the details that are important for where they're going with this story. And where Matthew wants to go to with this story is the Great Commission. Is that Jesus, when he, just before he ascended into heaven, he gives them instructions. He gives them their mission. And this is what, we've talked about this a lot here at Keystone, because it's not just their mission, it's our mission. Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Right? Jesus has all authority. He can do anything he wants. And in the moment he can do anything he wants, what does he tell his disciples to do? He doesn't tell them to go and conquer the world. He doesn't tell them to go and overpower everybody. He says, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. Jesus says, just go and be a disciple. And as a disciple, make disciples. Make sure they're reborn in my name. Make sure that you're teaching them everything I told you to obey. It's not just tell them to obey things. It's no, you obey it, and then you teach them to obey it. And then Jesus promises the most important thing. I am with you always to the very end of the age. That is a promise that remains true. It's a mission that remains for us to accomplish here on earth, and that's making disciples, baptizing them, teaching them to obey, and understanding that Jesus is always with us. All right, so that is the Gospel of Matthew. Now we're doing this in chronological order. So tomorrow, when we open up the scriptures, we're actually going to be in First Thessalonians. That's the next book in the list, kind of chronologically. And so where we've been is we started in we did First and Second Corinthians, not because they chronologically came first, just because that was a nice way to do kind of a 30-day reading as we started the year. But then we decided, okay, people wanted it to keep going, and I said, okay, we can keep going. Let's just do it chronologically to do something different. And so we jumped to James, then to Galatians, then to Mark, then to Matthew, and now next we'll be looking at First Thessalonians. And so we'll see you tomorrow for First Thessalonians chapter 1. Have a good one.